Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get back underway. Again, occupational hazard on length of these presentations and then being flexible and shifting things around. In that light, we're going to next hear from Barbara Mowbray on developing your content, but we're also going to hear from Scott Robillard and merge in the marketing notions and try to meld it into one presentation and save some time. So without further ado.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, first of all, I just sort of want to get a feel for the audience. How many of you have ever spoken on a CLE seminar before, has served as a presenter? Almost everybody, I would say. How many of you have ever been involved in the planning of a CLE seminar? Oh, outstanding. So we have a lot of experience in the room, so we'll certainly tailor our presentation to not tell you too much of what you already know. First thing I want to sort of get into, though, is before you ever even start planning, there are several things that you can do to ensure that your program is going to get off to a great start, that you're going to hit your marketing deadlines, which Scott will tell you and we'll all tell you is a big difference in whether you have a full room such as this one or maybe not so much. But it also can sort of give you some direction and help you sort of, I would say, better define what it is that you were looking to do in line with the goals that Trish was talking about earlier in the program. So before you want to get started, I would say, and this is just a practical matter, and it's been mentioned before, but it's very much worth mentioning again, you absolutely want to get your space reserved. Tim had alluded to the fact that we have several events that happen in this room every week, so if you do want to get a room here with the bar, we do please recommend that you at least contact us at least 5 months out. And our goal is always to have a finalized program turned over to your seminar planners or your section coordinator by 3 months in advance of your program. That's going to be key. You can see it's actually the footer to every page of my course materials for you today, because that is what we are constantly looking at for a deadline, and I think you'll find that matters. We've talked a little bit about this in the earlier segment before the break, and that was it's really important to have an idea of who you want to have plan this seminar. Certainly there's benefits to, however works best for you, but, if you're planning with a committee, that's fantastic. You usually get a lot of great ideas. You also sometimes, it can slow things down if you feel like an idea needs to pass through the full committee before you're ready to move on anything. So I would recommend that if you are looking to plan your seminar with a planning committee, maybe start a little bit sooner than you normally would. Single chair, again, this is a really nice option because your program chair can just make some decisions, and it sometimes will go a little bit faster. However, you want to make sure that whoever you're putting up to the task as your section, when you volunteer someone or volunteer somebody that they're planning a CLE seminar for you, you want to make sure this person has enough time, maybe has a reputation for meeting deadlines, and isn't shy about cold calling people that they don't know and inviting them to speak on your program. And whoever you do, whichever route you do choose to go, sometimes also we have co-chairs. That's, I think, fairly common when we work with sections. If you have co-chairs, whoever it is that you choose to have plan your seminar, please make sure that you give them the gift of empowering them. Let them make the choices as to whether something is a good topic or not, whether decisions about whether they want to approve the marketing, if they like the direction that things are going. It's a gift that you can give to whoever's planning that if they don't need to have to constantly go back to your board and get the blessing to make sure that they can move forward. And they will thank you for it. So at the outset, and I'm going to start looping Scott in here at this time because this is very important, and it will come back to us when it's time to turn the program over to marketing. Before you've made a single phone call or identified a single presentation that you're going to have on your seminar, you're going to want to know, what's your Why am I doing this seminar right now and at this time? And I think that you as section members have a distinct advantage in that you're obviously very active in your section, you're very active in your practice area, you have a pulse on what matters to your members, you have a pulse on what topics are relevant, what problems you can solve. And I think as you'll be hearing from Erin after this presentation here, this discussion, you'll be finding that what your members are probably most likely looking for, they're looking for these programs to solve a problem for them. And if you can make that happen, you give them so much value and you entice them to want to come to your program. So if there's a new development in the law, I mean, the trust code changed last year, and I think, we almost had to cut off registration because we weren't going to have room for fire codes. That many people need that information. If you can identify an area in your area of practice that is new and on the horizon, something that's changing, people want to know that information. If you have a really good pulse to identify if there is a knowledge gap out there. And frankly, I would say the distinct advantage that you have planning your seminars is you know what you and your fellow section members, you know what you gripe about. Those usually make, I think, the best CLE topics because what gives you all the biggest headaches? That's usually a pretty good CLE topic if we can help provide a solution for the attendees. So important things you're going to have to ask. And, in your course materials, I do have sort of a, I guess like a planning guide similar to what Trish had provided for you. You may not need it now, but when you find yourself having been volunteered to plan a CLE seminar, it could help you to go through that. And I want to make sure, one other point that we want to make sure that everybody leaves the room knowing today is that, there's certainly a lot of information, a lot of steps. We do this every day. And if you ever find yourself in a position where you're really feeling lost or you're really feeling like you need a resource, we are here for you. So this is true whether you are co-producing a seminar with Pinnacle or not. And there's information in the course materials of how to get a hold of us. We can certainly, if you have a question about, oh gosh, when was the last time a certain topic was visited by other state bar programs, we can look that up for you. If you would like us to come to one of your planning meetings and help you really get a handle on which topics and how to narrow it down or set up your schedule or any step along the way, please give us a call. We do this. It'd be great if we had some advance notice because certainly some days, Erin and I think there are some weeks I don't see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're just in opposite seminars.
Right.
Yes, we sit next to each other, cubes right next to each other, and for some weeks I just don't even see you because we are in opposite seminars for the week. So, but anyway, I just want to make sure that you all have that out there. So we've talked about our overall seminar focus. We want to know, is there anything significant happening in that area of the law? Is there an information gap?
I would add too, Barbara, if there's something going on in the news right now that's
Yes.
really a hot topic, like with the Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner issue, transgender rights are at the forefront. People want to know that stuff, regardless of whether that's an area of law that they practice in. So kind of the topical things that are in the news make really great subjects for CLE presentations.
And it will help you because at some point in the process, we're going to be asking you a series of questions for your marketing. And if you can give us that information.
Yeah, usually what we'll start with is, who are you developing your program for? What's your primary audience? When you're developing a program, you should have a primary and secondary audience in mind, so you're addressing those specific needs. Once you start that, we can actually give you some information that can help you identify who our potential audience is. We can look at things like profiles of your previous attendees if you've done the program before. A lot of times you have peripheral audiences who are steady attendees, but you don't think of them as that way because they tend not, they're a related area of practice. They're not your primary areas of practice. So we tend to help identify your potential audience members by looking at previous attendees for that program or a similar program. If it's a brand new program, we'll look at something that addresses a similar topic, or we can also go deeper and look at product purchases. Are there related products that the bar sells that we could look at and see who are the types of lawyers who are buying these? What areas of practice are they in? What type of practice are they in? Are they in other sections that we should be identifying? And usually what we'll do is we'll pull a series of profiles over a number of years and look at what are the kind of the characteristics you're seeing carry across all these different items. And then we'll sit down with either the planner or your section coordinator and say, here's some other areas you should be looking at, and if you're still in development, you may want to make sure you're calling out items of interest to these other folks who have been attendees or who seem to be interested in this area of law.
Oh, absolutely. And we're getting the microphone off to someone here.
What areas do you track? I mean, section membership, section of the state. What information do you have available if, we want to pull that information?
I have almost all your demographic information that I can run lists against. I don't recommend necessarily gender. You tend to alienate more than you include. But we do look at things like years in practice, firm size, geographic location, areas of practice, section memberships, previous purchasers, previous attendance to similar or that specific program. I'm trying to think of what else would be highly relevant. Now, remember, we also, in your areas of practice, you indicate on your dues statement, or members indicate on their dues statement, how big is that area to you? Are you practicing slightly, or is it a 50% or greater? So we can even tell how big of an area of practice is this for individual members and select even deeper.
I would agree, and I would add to that there have been times that Aaron or I have been planning a seminar, and Scott will come along to us and say, "Do you know that the last time you only listed maybe business and real estate? Did you know that the last time that you offered this topic, intellectual property, you got a lot of people who came to that. Would you like us to broaden your list?" And we're like, "Yes,
Yeah,
yes, we would."
It can surprise us, yeah.
Yeah,
for
and,
sure.
and it can be surprising from time to time. So at this point, we've identified what our need is. We've identified who our audience most likely is. Now it's time to start looking at topics. And what we usually do is we just start brainstorming. We get together with our program chair and, sometimes in advance of the topic, or in advance of the meeting, we'll look at past programs, we'll look at articles in Wisconsin Lawyer, we'll look at anything we can see that maybe another provider has offered, and everything is fair game. Everything is on the table, and you wind up with a list that I think a program that Aaron and I worked on together recently had like 2 pages of just possible topics. And had we been able to offer all of them, we would still be sitting here talking about employment discrimination, and the program was in April. So, everything is fair game at that point. But then what we would like to do is we go back and we identify what did we say back, in the beginning? What did we say was the purpose? Maybe you discovered that there's a knowledge gap, and you really need to get out there and make sure that everybody knows relevant information. So then you can call through your brainstorm list and say, okay, are we seeing any themes here? Are we seeing things that will meet that need? Sometimes, like I said, the griping that you hear, what do your members need to know to help solve their problems? And I have to say, the section programs that we've worked on, you guys are really good at that. You have a very good pulse on, so some of this may seem, a little easy for you, but it's worth saying that every topic that you're going to put on your schedule really deserves to go through the paces to determine if it's going to meet the needs and be a fit for this seminar. And if it's not, maybe it's a fit for a future program, and that's okay too, and that's just fine. Then we usually take our topic, and I'm usually at this point, I'll bet that every topic that you have identified, in the back of your mind, you have somebody in mind who you would call for that topic and who you would like to hear a seminar from. And we're not quite there yet, but one of the things you might want, we're not quite there ready to call them just yet, but one of the things that we're going to want to do is determine, what do we want that session to look like? If it's a practical matter, if it's something that, for instance, the employment discrimination seminar that Aaron and I worked on together, one of the big pink elephant in the room was practitioners were telling us, "Oh, nobody takes these cases. Everybody thinks they're unwinnable on both sides." And we decided, well, that would be appropriate for a panel to sit down and really just put it out there. Are these really unwinnable? Why do we think that? And of course, we found a panel of folks who were winning these cases and could speak to why maybe that misconception wasn't always the case. But you're going to want to look at substantive. If you're going to sit down and go through all of the ways a new law is changing, those are usually topics that lend themselves nicely to a single presenter or one or two presenters. A word, I will say a word on panel discussions, and I apologize if I'm taking anything out of your presentation. But what we do like to see and what we do need to see, if you are going to put a panel at the front of the room, we need it to be moderated. We need to have a moderator, and that moderator needs a clear vision of where the discussion is going. Will have been well prepared in that there's been a call of some sorts where all the panelists have gotten together and, they know where the discussion is going to be going. And we're not relying that, well, we've got 30 minutes of content, and we obviously presume that we're going to get 15 minutes of questions from the audience. Because if you don't get those questions, unfortunately, if your seminar runs short, you do lose your CLE credit. That can happen. I don't think it's ever happened on a program I've worked on, but you can bet that there are instances where if your seminar is running short and opposite of our situation today, you see Aaron or myself scrambling in the back of the room saying, okay, can someone go longer because we can't lose the CLE?
Yeah, we wind up running around trying to find questions to ask of the panel, asking earlier presenters to come up with more reasonable questions that make more sense because we don't know the topic area as well as they do.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
Or
One other
sometimes
point-
I just ask them myself.
Yes.
So if you get a dumb question, it's probably from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has happened too.
Thanks, Tim. That's my boss.
Right. But one other point on panels, a lot of times when people are planning them, they don't put anybody in charge of course materials for the panel discussion. And if you want to get CLE for that presentation, I think the rule is that you need to have course materials for it.
And
So-
there's a bit of sticker shock when you say to the panel, okay, who's writing the outline?
Right.
And they're like, what? I just agreed to be on a panel.
Yeah, so having
So-
that resolved early on is a better situation.
And as long as we're on the topic of panels, I was going to bring this up later, but now would be a good time. If you have folks in your practice area or in your section that have stage fright, or that they have a lot to say, but they're maybe maybe a little bit dry and you wouldn't want to listen to them for a full hour, put them on a panel. That is something that we found, you don't see me at the podium right now. I'm not the type of presenter that's particularly good at a podium, but if you put me with a panel, it's certainly a lot easier for me to. It jives with my style.
It becomes conversational.
Yes.
And it changes the cadence and the rhythm. You don't have one monotone voice going on and on. Yes, you don't have one voice just droning on and on and on.
And to that point, I would say, no matter who you're using, we tend to advise against, if you're going to have somebody up there alone for an entire segment, we tend to advise against putting them on for more than an hour at a time without at least a break. I mean, even if their teaching style and, their content is something you could listen to all day, we tend to recommend that you switch it up a bit just to not have too much on one person's shoulders in case there are other folks in the audience who maybe learn a bit different.
Well, and that puts me in mind of another tip too. I mean, one of the things you should be doing when you're asking people to present is getting their understanding of how long the presentation should be.
Yes.
Not every presentation has to be 50 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, that is the credit hour, but if you're doing multiple presentations in a day, you get to lump them all together, and if it's much more appropriate for that session to be 25 minutes, do it like that, or 30, or whatever it winds up being. But get their opinion on how long they are going to go. And as you can see, sometimes that opinion isn't always accurate, but at least you aren't just pigeonholing what it is.
Right. And actually, it provides a great segue, because now that we have identified our topics, we've identified which topics are going to fit the bill for our particular program, it's time to go on to creating a draft schedule. And I would say that typically when we start to hear from you, you guys have already made it to this phase. Certainly some people, it comes very easily to them. And just as we get started in what would be creating our draft schedule, I want to reiterate what Tim just said. Topics can vary in length. We sometimes get a lot of seminars that come our way, and it's 50 minutes with this presenter and 50 minutes and 50 and 50, and that's fine. And usually you'll find that they get refined as we go back to presenters and say, do you really need 50 minutes? And they're, no, I need 25, or, I need.
I need 75.
Exactly, and we go from there. Keep in mind, as you are starting the planning of your seminar, or sort of just kind of your draft schedule kind of serves, I would say, as a list. It serves almost as your to-do list, because you've got to reach out to a presenter for each one of those topics and get their, certainly their blessing and their confirmation that they're available at your seminar. But you also need to get a finalized title from them and a description of what their presentation looks like. It's always helpful. We like to put 1 or 2 bullet points with each presentation title that we offer in one of our brochures, so that, if you're like, wait a minute, what does that even mean? You can, as you read the topic, for instance, you can go down the chain and say, oh, okay, I understand the direction of where that's going, and that will
If
help.
I can jump in.
Yes, please do.
Collecting accurate content and not just accurate, but complete content from your faculty members will actually make marketing your program much easier. Even if you're not utilizing the full services of the marketing department at the State Bar, and you're just working with your section coordinator and maybe your CLE subcommittee, having the information in front of you so you can actually write an accurate description that's of interest to your people or to your customers, that is usually the largest stumbling block we have.
Yes.
And that's especially true when we're working with sections who tend to have a broad spread of volunteers as their faculty. So I can't emphasize enough what are some of the minimum content things you should have when you're ready to get started. Title of your program. You need an overall title. You need to be able to describe what this program is going to do for your attendees. Not the individual sessions, but overall, if you come for 4 hours or 6 hours, what am I going to get out of this program? You need the titles for each of the individual sessions. You need to be able to tell people, this person is going to talk about this topic for 30 minutes, and here are some subtopics that'll be in there. You want to make sure you've got dates and locations. Believe it or not, we have people
Yeah.
who want to advertise their program without telling them where it's going to be or when it's going to be. It's not very useful. You can't do anything with it. Again, faculty lists. People want to know who's talking about what topics. The reason for that, some people think they know more than the faculty. Some people, make decisions based on, I've seen this person before, I don't think they have anything more to add to what I know. And so it's important for you to add credibility to your programs by telling them who's going to speak to them. And featured speakers, if you're bringing in someone special, make sure you highlight that. If you bury it in the copy, nobody's ever going to know. So those are the kinds of things you want to make sure you're calling out. Special events. If you're doing something special during your program, are you having an award? Are you doing a luncheon? Are you doing a social hour reception? Those are all valuable add-ons to your program or your event, because it gives them really good networking opportunities to make connections with others in their program or others in their areas of practice. You heard it kind of spoken about by for the BBE, and Tim has talked about it, and Trish talked about it, CLE credits. I can't emphasize how important it is for you to tell people you're going to apply for CLE credits, and it's even better if you can tell them we've been approved for CLE credits. But at a minimum, you should be calling out, we intend to apply for so many CLE credits. People don't, there's a segment of lawyers who attend for the sake of information, but most lawyers are making a value, cost-benefit analysis. Am I going to get enough back from this, or should I be looking for something else? So CLE credits is incredibly important when you're marketing your program. And the last thing is venue description. If you're doing a presentation in a special location and you're asking people to travel long distances, if there's a better or if there's another reason for them to come, include their family, or there's other things that could attract them to that venue, you should include it. I think I hit most of the
Most of the marketing,
content.
yeah, absolutely. With regard to when you are planning that schedule that ultimately you'll turn over to one of your program planners, you'll be turning it over to your section coordinator. Some other considerations you need to think about, you have to give your attendees a break at least every 120 minutes. So keep that in mind as you're planning it. And that is a requirement from the Board of Bar Examiners, so we adhere to that. And for question and answer, this is something that we run into a lot, where folks want to get to their minimum CLE using a question and answer segment. Question and answer, yes, it does, it would qualify for CLE, provided you have enough questions, and hopefully, we hope that you have the answers. What we sometimes will see, or what we, I guess, best practice for what we recommend is go ahead and include your question and answer, but include it over and above what you've applied for the CLE credit. And that can have a dual benefit for you. On the one hand, if your seminar is, running long, you're not saying, oh gosh, we're going to end so much, we're not going to get out of here until 15 minutes after the program's done. Well, you can go into that Q&A time if you need to. The other is certainly the
Right.
problem.
Right, so if you know you have 15 minutes of Q&A already on the schedule, your end date is that 15 minutes longer, or end time is that 15 minutes longer, and you have somebody that's going 5 minutes long, you don't have to go up there and yank them off the stage and stop them from saying what they wanted to say. You can just buffer into that and know that you can make your Q&A just a little bit shorter at the end of the day.
Yep.
But to Barbara's other point, when you calculate out your credits, so there's a certain amount that might get truncated off, and Jacqueline didn't get into the half credit notion, but you need, initially you need a full 50 minutes. So if you're going to do a program that's only a half an hour, that's not going to get any CLE credit at all. But if you do an initial 50 minutes and then you have an extra half an hour, it's 25 minutes for a half credit. So in a situation like that where you did 80 minutes, you'd have 5 minutes of time that isn't being counted. It's being truncated off on that CLE calculation. That's what we try to do with our Q&A. We try to make sure that if we're doing a 15-minute Q&A session, it's part of that stuff that we aren't counting on and relying upon to get to that last half credit.
Well said. And then another just a minor thing to sort of keep in mind, if you are going to be using the services of State Bar Wisconsin Pinnacle Media staff and will be webcasting your seminar, we do need you to start at 8:30 in the morning. This has to do with how we run our webcast replays, and it kind of messes up the flow if we don't start at 8:30. So try to keep that in mind, and we can help you get onto that track if it's forgotten. Once you've developed a seminar or developed a schedule, you've developed who you'd like to reach out to, and you're starting to reach out to these people. When you get somebody who says no, usually my next question is, oh, I'm so sorry, I would have loved to have had you on my seminar. Who would you go to if who do you think is a resource on this? And sometimes you can find new resources that way. Keep asking until you get the yes, and if you find yourself stuck on who would I even use, give us a call. We have that information. We might be able to help connect you with somebody that would be a good resource for your program. When they say yes, as Scott said, we need things from them at that point. For me, it's even beyond what we'll need for marketing. Yes, I need a final title, because chances are when I've created a draft schedule, it's like, I'm going to talk about religious discrimination. That's a terrible, I mean, you need a verb, put a verb in there on your title for your seminar title or your section title. So, go to the presenter and say, what would you call this? And they'd say, oh, wow, religious discrimination after maybe a Supreme Court case that had come out. And people are, oh, okay, I understand, the landscape's changed and this is where they're going with it. Like I said, I cannot stress it enough. We do need a description of the topic, especially if it is an ethics topic. In order to submit that to the Board of Bar Examiners, they require a higher level of detail when we're submitting an ethics topic, so we need that from you for that. Always, we'll certainly check with them, and we recommend you do too. Make sure we're identifying the presenter how they would like to be identified in the brochure. So if somebody goes by their middle name, we can make that happen, and what have you. We also need from them at that point, we'll be getting into contact with them, or either you can or we can. They need to know when their course materials are due to us, and we tend to make our deadline to be a full month in advance of the program. This is so we can do things, first of all, we need to make sure if something comes in and it violates copyright law and from time to time, somebody will turn something in thinking they have permission. If we need to know that there's permission to use something that's been put out there by another entity. We have, what else do we need from them? We need a lot of, we need their description. Yeah. If we're going to be filming them, we will get in contact with them about making sure we have permission to film them. We would certainly never broadcast somebody's name and likeness without their permission, and in fact, we can't. So,
I think also with regard to the course materials deadlines, we get a lot of questions about why do you need this so early? We need it early in order to review for copyright violations, amongst other things. We need to make sure the materials are adequate. We get a lot of complaints when the materials are not up to par, are not good resources. And so we need to review those. We need to be able to send them back if they're not, up to par. And also, it does take time for us to compile them, get them off to the printer. Tony, our registrar, can speak to that. She spends a lot of time working on that. And so it becomes a struggle when things are coming in late. So I know it seems like it's pretty far in advance, but it really does take a lot of time to compile that information.
absolutely. And, now that we've, let's say we're at the point in planning our seminar where we have confirmed our faculty, and it's pretty exciting. Your program planner or your section coordinator is about to turn it over to Scott. There are a couple things that you want to do at the last, finally and in conclusion, some things that you want to do right as you're about to turn it over. And I have to say, I get nervous when it's time to turn it over to marketing. I do. I just want to make sure that, is it as perfect as it can be? Is there anything more I could be putting in here? Have I forgotten anything? Did I calculate my CLE incorrectly? So I'm always double checking those things. But there are some questions, and it's in your materials, some things that we would recommend that you ask yourself before you pull the trigger and give that to us. The questions that I would ask are, does the State Bar, whether you're section coordinator in Pinnacle, do we have the final schedule? You think you're done? Do we have your final schedule? Do all your presenters have a copy of this schedule? Do they know where they are going, what time we're going to put them on this stage, and any other information? Do the presenters know when their course materials are due? We will certainly reiterate that to them, but it is always helpful if you put that out there in the first place. Thank you so much. I'm excited you're on our program. Don't forget, course materials are due 1 month in advance. And if you have a panel discussion scheduled, and even if you have your description and everything ready for the brochure, now is the time to get a conference call planned and say, as a panel, let's put our heads together, make sure that we know where this discussion is going, and make sure that we have enough content to cover the full amount of time. And what are we going to do if we don't get any questions? What are we going to do if one of us talks too fast and we blow through the content really quickly? Do we have anything in reserve to do for that? So, and at that point, you'll turn it over to us. You'll probably get a phone call from one of us wanting to chat with you and make sure that we understand, primarily the focus. Why did what's important? What's special about this program that I should be bringing to Scott's attention? And it makes a huge difference for what you'll get in your marketing, and then ultimately what you'll get for whether you're approved for CLE credit, but what you get for an audience.
Okay. Well, thank you, Barbara. And looking through the materials that Barbara put together, she's got a lot of nice sample language in there. I can tell you from experience, attendees love that. So it doesn't matter what practice area it is. If you can give sample forms and language, they really, really like that.